Hello and welcome to today's cooking demo. Today we're going to be showing you how to make different vegetables through several different cooking methods. So just a taste of what you have to look forward to. We're going to make beets and sweet potatoes. It's roasted. This is one of my favorite recipes. I've shared this recipe with you before, but today we're going to show you how to make it. We're going to steam some broccoli and use some soy ginger sauce with it. And then we're also going to do roasted bell peppers, broiled asparagus, braised wintergreens, and sautéed spinach. So many of us think of eating vegetables as either cooked or raw, but really there's a lot of different ways that we can make vegetables, and each unique cooking method impacts the taste and flavor of the vegetable. Well, how many ways are there to cook them? Well, there's blanching, where we plunge vegetables into boiling water for a few minutes and then quickly move them over to ice cold water, and this can help us crisp up vegetables or prep them for later use, or even prep them to freeze. There's braising, where we place vegetables in a small amount of liquid or broth, and the broth or liquid itself may have other flavors in it, so we might add some extra vegetables to that broth. And we're actually going to be demonstrating how to braise with kale in today's recipe for the braised wintergreens. There's grilling, where vegetables are marinated or brushed with oil and placed in a grill or on skewers. We can microwave. This is a quick and easy way to cook, but it's also important to kind of pause in between cooking and stir and rotate the vegetables so that it's cooking more evenly and preventing any dry spots in the vegetable. You can roast. Vegetables are tossed in an oil or seasoning and roasted at a high heat until they are tender. And again, I'll show you how to do this with both the red peppers and beets and sweet potatoes. We could steam. There's steamed vegetables that are placed in a basket above boiling water and cooked. And we can stir fry. There's a small amount of oil or fat-free broth that is used to cook the vegetables over a high heat, and the vegetables are tossed until they're crisp. So hopefully you're seeing there's a lot of different ways that we can cook vegetables, and we haven't even covered every way. There's sauteing, or we can mix vegetables in a dish or substitute vegetables for normal ingredients like zucchini pasta and zucchini spaghetti, which is one of my favorites. We can also do the traditional method of boiling vegetables. I mean, that's one way we can certainly do it. That's probably the most common way people cook vegetables. But before we get started, it might be helpful to know that cooking does do some interesting things to vegetables. It's no surprise that vegetables are mainly composed of water. I think most of us know this. But when water is lost during the cooking, flavors become more intense. Some cooking methods lead to more water loss than others. Steaming and boiling are on the end where there's little water lost because there's water involved in the cooking method itself. When we get to roasting or even dehydrating vegetables, where you see dehydrated carrots or carrot chips or potato chips are kind of like that dehydrated, that drying the vegetables would lead to the largest amount of water loss. When we're cooking with cutting out water, we're also cutting out some of those nutrients, but we'll look in a second about how many nutrients are really lost. When cooking vegetables, it's best to keep the cooking time short to help with maintaining the nutrients and the bright color of the vegetables. While we do lose some nutrients when we cook most vegetables, some vegetables actually benefit from cooking. A cooked carrot actually allows us to absorb more nutrients than a raw carrot because the firm cell structure of the carrot breaks down so that more of the carotenes, minerals, and vitamin C are able to be absorbed. But nutrients can vary a good bit, even between one carrot to another carrot, or say one grapefruit to another grapefruit. So it gets to be a little bit difficult to really determine how much nutrients we've lost because it's also going to determine on how the plant was grown, on how it was stored, when it was picked, and those kinds of things. In general, when we cook though, we don't lose too many minerals, only about 5 to 10% of the mineral concentration of the vegetable. Vitamin losses can vary a good bit depending on the kind of vegetable, but also depending on the kind of vitamin. Tomatoes, eggplant, asparagus, and green beans tend to keep about 80% of their vitamins. Nutrients escape from the vegetable either when they're getting dissolved in the cooking water or they're destroyed by the heat from cooking. So some of our nutrients that are more susceptible to getting lost are going to be vitamin C and B vitamins, and these are most susceptible to boiling, simmering, steaming, or braising. So for these nutrients, it's best to choose a cooking method that doesn't involve water or that cooks the vegetable in a way that the liquid remains part of the dish, such as in a braise or in a casserole. Now, when it comes to boiling vegetables, adding them to water after the water has come to a full boil will help with maintaining nutrients. We'll do something similar and wait until the water is boiling to steam some broccoli in today's demonstration. This helps minimize the vitamin losses, and using a lid when steaming also helps minimize the water losses so that more of the nutrients are staying in the vegetable. So in today's case, we're looking at broccoli. And know that when it comes to steaming, some vegetables lose their color, while other vegetables like the brassica family, or broccoli for today, will have a stronger flavor after we steam. When it comes to preserving nutrients, shorter cooking times also help preserve, especially for vitamin C and thiamine, because there's less exposure to the heat. Stir frying and sauteing are both fast and good methods to maintain these nutrients. Cutting vegetables into smaller pieces can help reduce cooking time as well and help prevent further loss of nutrients. So, when it comes to picking what method to use when cooking your vegetables, think about flavor, think about appearance, time, nutrients, but overall, what do you prefer? If you're looking for some more information after today's webinar, I use a lot this book, Kitchen Wise. It's science cooking methods, so you can look at that. I also use the America's Test Kitchen cookbook as well. So those are great resources if you're looking for more, but enjoy today's cooking demo. All right, for today's first cooking demo, we're gonna do our beets and sweet potatoes. Now, you might have seen this recipe before. I've sent it out before. I'll send it out again for you if you want. You can take a look at that, but I'll also share with you a roasted root vegetables recipe. So it's very, very similar to this one. We're just, instead of doing beets and sweet potatoes, it'll be other types of tuber vegetables. I think sweet potatoes is still in it, but then also turnips, carrots, some other great vegetables in it. So I have a scrap bucket here to help us, just to help make things a little bit quicker and easier. But first we're gonna peel our vegetables. I'm gonna throw a shallot in there with it, just for fun, a little bit of a different feel to it. So shallots are kind of like onions, but they're a milder taste. They're not quite as strong as onions, but they have more nutrients too. So we'll throw that in there with it. First, I'm gonna preheat the oven to 450. It's gonna take some time to get up the heat. We'll also need olive oil. I'm gonna use Italian seasoning, but you can season with whatever you would like. And then I have aluminum foil on our pan ready to go, so we can just throw all the vegetables onto our pan when we're ready. All right, to make everything cook evenly, we're gonna cut everything into small pieces. So we'll peel everything first. The beets, sometimes people will cook them with the skin on, and then it's easier to pull off after you've already cooked it. But we wanna cut everything up into smaller pieces, so it's gonna be a lot easier if we peel it first. So I'll start with the sweet potatoes. They're usually a little bit easier to peel to start out. So one question I get a lot is, what's the difference between potatoes and sweet potatoes? Are sweet potatoes really that much nutritionally better than regular potatoes? And my answer to that kind of depends on what you're looking for. If you're looking at overall carbohydrate content, sweet potatoes are going to have more, just as many carbs, or at least close to as many carbs as a regular potato. So serving size is going to matter. A serving size for a potato should be about the size of a computer mouse. So if you look at it, this is this big. Computer mouse is about that big. So this is really 2 servings, so that's something to keep in mind. But where you're gonna get more benefit from sweet potatoes is there's more color to them, so that's one way you can tell. But it has more vitamin A with that orange color. You can see there's lots of carotenoids, which this is something that is released more when we cook things. So carrots, sweet potatoes, some peppers, you'll release more carotenoids when you cook them, so it'll be a little bit better for you. Sweet potatoes also have a little bit more fiber than them, as well as some other nutrients over regular potatoes. So I'm gonna go ahead and put the beets to the side for a second to give us a little more space. The beets get kind of messy. If you can see, my board's already a little red from the beets. So we'll go ahead and cut the sweet potatoes first, get those out of the way, cut the shallot, get that out of the way, and then we'll go and move on to the beets, since those tend to be a little more messy. So when it comes to cutting sweet potatoes, get nice even cuts. You can cut down the middle first, and then there's a lot of different ways. I like to quarter it. So you can quarter it this way. And then it gets a lot easier to make nice even slices from here. Some people like to go in discs first and then cut from there. I find this is a little bit easier. So I have one cut there to make it a little more even. I'm gonna make sure I have even cuts all the way across. And now when I cut lengthwise, I can control how big the pieces are and try to keep them about the same size. We want them to be pretty close to the same size so everything cooks nice and evenly. And then we'll throw them onto our pan. So for this part of the sweet potato, it's a little bit fatter. So we're gonna cut it again, quarter it again, to get our nice even lengthwise pieces. Cut one more time. And I'll do the same thing on this piece. So, one more time. Now I can put them together, cut more at once. All right, now that we're done with the sweet potato, we'll peel and cut up the shallots. So make it a little easier, we'll just cut off the end. Now it's a lot easier to peel. And we can go ahead and start cutting. So an easier way to cut into this is to just cut in half, but not all the way down. And make nice small little slices. Through the shallot. Careful to watch out for your fingers. And then cut in half the other way. So you're almost making like a tic-tac-toe board. So now when you slice, you should notice these nice small slices. And lastly, onto our beet. So we're gonna peel these first. They can be a little bit tricky to peel. Your hands are gonna be pretty red, so you probably wanna take off any rings or anything you're worried about being red. I swapped out potato peelers just because this one's a little bit sharper, which is definitely gonna be helpful for the beet, more so than the sweet potato. As we get closer to the roots, we don't really need to get that close, we just need to kind of get close enough where we're going to be cutting off. We see the roots sticking up, so we'll go ahead and leave that there, but we won't really worry about peeling anything on there. All right, that's pretty good. So now we'll cut up the beet. Just cut off the top part there. And then cut off a little bit at the bottom of this guy. Now, similar thing, these are a little bit harder to cut than the sweet potatoes, but you can cut in discs or however you want, just trying to get those small, even pieces. So I usually cut these in discs. Then we can go lengthwise. And horizontally. Get our beet out of the scrap here. Alright, so if you've eaten beets before, you know your urine might turn red after you go to the bathroom next time. So that's a heads up if you didn't know that. But another interesting thing about beets is they are high in nitrites, but these kind of nitrites are actually really beneficial for us. They help open up our blood vessels, which could potentially help with sports performance for one thing, as far as blood transport and nutrient transport to the muscles when we're exercising. But it also might help with blood pressure as well. So with that being said, we're going to set the cutting board to the side. And now we'll go ahead and just coat this all, spread it out, coat it with the olive oil. Just get olive oil all over it. And as far as proportion and how much, it really just kind of depends on how much you like. I try to eyeball it. And then we'll really sprinkle it with Italian seasoning a good bit. And our oven's ready, and so the next thing we'll do is just kind of fold this up, make sure beets and sweet potatoes stay in. And I'll get another thing of aluminum foil, put it on top, and throw it into the oven for 50 minutes. Alright, so we've got our beets and our sweet potatoes out of the oven, so we'll just take off this top layer of aluminum foil. And you can see they're nice and roasted, and they all kind of mix together. Some of the sweet potatoes turn a little red after the beets, but all good and ready to serve. For our second recipe, we're going to make some steamed broccoli, and then we'll also make a soy ginger sauce to go with it. So to start out, we'll go ahead and cut our broccoli. And still keep our scrap bucket, so we're just going to keep the florets, the top part. Now remember, the smaller the pieces, the quicker it's going to cook and the more nutrients will save over the long run. So we're going to rip it up a little bit here just so it cooks a little bit quicker. And we'll put it in our steam basket. And just so you can see, this is our steam basket here. This is going to go in the pan. So we'll fill the pan with water, just enough to make sure that it gets underneath, and we'll bring it to a boil before we start cooking the broccoli. Alright, and that looks like enough to fill, so we'll save this broccoli for another day. But we'll go ahead and fill this up with water. So I'm just going to fill it just a couple inches so that it can get to a boil and create a steam. Now while we wait for the pot to boil before we put our broccoli in, we can start working on our sauce. And so first we're going to mince some garlic, and then we also need to grate some ginger. So this is a little grater. It's used usually to help zest, but it can also help with grating too. So we'll use that to help with the ginger. And we'll also use our potato peeler. So I'm going to grip up on the knife just for the sake of not having to use a separate utensil here. And we will make fine cuts here. Alright, and now to grate the ginger, we'll just peel it first. And it helps to get a ginger that's a little more flat so it's a little bit easier to peel. One that's a little more knobby gets a little bit more complicated. We just need a tablespoon, so I'll use this spot to kind of start out. Peel off some more. Alrighty. And there's our teaspoon. So we'll go ahead and put oil in the pan. I hear the water boiling, so we'll go ahead and put our broccoli in as well. So we'll just close this up as much as we can and throw it into the pan. Alright, so I have the ginger and the garlic in the pan cooking with the vegetable oil. Now that I have a 1/4 cup of water, so we're going to add 2 tablespoons of low sodium soy sauce to it. And then 2 tablespoons of Marin, or we're using white cooking wine. Marin's kind of like a sake, which is it's a type of cooking wine. We're going to use a tablespoon of rice vinegar. And a teaspoon of our toasted sesame oil. Alright. And I'm going to use the teaspoon to kind of help stir it some here. Once our ginger and garlic is nice and toasted, we'll add that to the pan. Alright, now you can see here, now the ginger and garlic is getting nice and toasted, so it's pretty close to being ready for the sauce. So we'll go ahead and add the sauce to it now. Now we'll just let this simmer for 4 to 6 minutes and let it get a little bit syrupy. Now for the broccoli, I put a lid on the broccoli so that the water will stay in and help keep the nutrients in with the broccoli. Now if you remember from earlier, we mentioned that the broccoli should actually get brighter when we steam it. And so if you look, you can see it actually is a lot brighter now that we've steamed it. So here's our sauce. It's nice and thicker now. So we can just add that over the broccoli, or you can serve it over cauliflower if you want. Nice soy ginger sauce to serve over. And then we have a thin cut scallion to just garnish on top. And there you go. As I talked about in our intro video, we're going to be braising some winter greens, and in this case, kale. So I have our kale here. We're going to actually start out by adding olive oil to our pan, and about 2 tablespoons worth, so I can kind of eyeball it. I'm going to heat this up first, and we'll meet you back over at the stove. Again, this is a recipe that's going to be adding fluids and steps to help kind of season and flavor the vegetables. All right, if you can see in here, our olive oil has gotten nice and shiny in there, so we'll go ahead and add the onions to it. And we'll let those cook for about 6 minutes. All right, so the onion is browning and it is pretty close, so it's been about 5 minutes. And so we're gonna add the garlic and red pepper flakes. Now we'll heat up the garlic and the red pepper flakes until the garlic starts becoming more fragrant, which is going to be about a minute. All right, I'm smelling the garlic, so we can go ahead and add half the grains from the kale here, and we're going to cook those until they start to wilt. All right, the greens are about wilted now, so we'll add the rest of the greens, the broth, the water, and a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Now that all of those are in there, we're going to go ahead and cover it with the lid, and then we're going to let it sit as we set it to medium-low for the heat, and we'll let it sit here for a while. All right, it's been about 30 minutes for our kale here, so you can see it's nice and brown and kind of wilted. So we're just going to keep stirring it and let the rest of this water evaporate, and so we're going to move the heat up to about medium-high. And just keep stirring until it actually gets really dry and nice and crispy. All right, it's been about 8 to 10 minutes, so most of the fluid on the bottom of the pan has evaporated, and if you listen closely, you can hear the kale start to sizzle. It might be a little bit hard to see the evaporated fluid, but hopefully you can hear the kale sizzling. So we're going to take it off of the burner now. Turn off the stovetop. And now we'll just add our 2 to 3 tablespoons of lemon juice, and then we'll also add some salt and pepper to taste if you want. We can stir that in. And add a little bit more lemon juice if you want. Lemon juice acid really helps with bitter plants and bitter vegetables like kale or collard greens, Brussels sprouts, or asparagus. So I like lemon juice on it just because it helps kind of give it a nice flavor and kind of counteract that bitter. And enjoy. Another recipe we'll be making is sautéed spinach. And so for this recipe we need garlic, which it's finely sliced, which I already have here. We'll need lemon, red pepper flakes, and then our spinach, as well as some salt. And to start out, we're going to start zesting a lemon. So you can use a zester. So this is a zester. We used it to grate the ginger, but you can use it to zest the lemon just by scraping like this. Now, that's perfectly fine if you want to use it, but it does release a lot of the flavor and aromas when you use it. So it's a lot easier, it's a lot quicker. You can also zest a lemon by cutting and slicing the lemon. So I'm going to slice off the yellow, which is where we're going to get that zest. And just do straight lines down. We're not cutting into the actual lemon. You can see the lemon's still intact. And we don't need a whole lot, so this actually will be pretty quick. We just really need half a teaspoon of grated lemon zest. So what we're going to do now is, you can see we don't want the white. The white's the bitter part of the lemon. So we're actually going to just very, very carefully slice under our fingertips. And gradually remove that white part. So we might have some extra left over, but I've gotten most of that white off. We don't want to damage the cells, but that zest is actually very, very sweet if you can get that white bitter part off. That off. So we have a little bit of a slice here. You can kind of see it's a little translucent or kind of see-through. So we'll just gently kind of do nice fine lines here. It's piling up on the knife, which is perfectly fine. Then now we can slice it into smaller pieces. You can keep going. I have about a quarter teaspoon right now, so I'm just going to finish up zesting the lemon here. So to start our sauteed spinach, we're just going to start with heating up some olive oil and then our garlic into the pot. So we have that heating up. We have our nice thin lines of garlic, and I'm just going to... Now as the garlic sizzles, we'll keep shaking the pot so to keep it from sticking together. Now that the garlic is browned, we're going to actually add the spinach and stir that in. And we'll add our red pepper flakes and our lemon zest, as well as a quarter teaspoon of salt. And now we're going to move the spinach to a coriander and get rid of any extra fluid. And we'll get rid of all of that extra fluid into a bowl. And now we can put our spinach into a bowl and season it with our lemon juice. I have a 1/4 teaspoon, so we're going to use 8 1/4 teaspoons. Generally, it's better to use the actual measurement you're supposed to, but I'm trying to save on dishes, so. All right, and there's your sauteed spinach. For our next recipe, we're going to broil some asparagus. So this recipe calls for asparagus, but then also lemon zest, a little bit of salt and sugar. And so that'll get sprinkled on at the end. But to start out, we're gonna cut our asparagus. So what you're gonna do is just take an asparagus spear and about 3/4 of the way up, bend until it breaks. And it'll break to get off the tough stuff. So the stuff that usually doesn't taste as good and is a little harder to eat. So we're just gonna do that with each of these. I find this part pretty fun. And it'll just naturally break wherever that toughest spot is, so. And then just spread them out so that they're all evenly distributed on the pan. We'll set the oven to broil, and then we want this to go on the bottom rack as low as it can go in the oven, so it's close to the broiler. But before we stick it in the broiler, we're gonna just add some olive oil and coat it with olive oil. I'll drizzle it all over. All right, I just pulled our asparagus out from the broiler. So it's only been 4 minutes. Now we're just gonna sprinkle with the lemon zest and sugar and salt. So I mixed the lemon zest and with the sugar and salt so it stick together a little bit and make it a little bit more evenly distributed. And now we're ready to serve. Our last recipe, but certainly not our least, we are going to make broiled red peppers. So this is going to be another quick recipe. We'll start out cutting the pepper, just cut the top off. And then we'll take out the middle of the pepper. The seed just like that. And we're actually just going to cut it lengthwise. Down the middle, kind of like hot dog style. And we want to get that white part out. And we want our pepper to lay pretty flat. So we're actually going to cut off this end right here so it can lay a little bit flatter. And we're going to cut it in kind of just similar to how we cut our lemon for our lemon zest. Get all of the white off. Same thing on this half. We'll just put it down flatwise on our tray. Flat down, and now we'll put it into the oven. Again, it's going to be on broil. We'll put it in for 4 minutes, turn it, put it another 4 minutes. All right, here's our broiled red peppers, and so very carefully I'm going to put them into a bowl. And quickly cover this over with aluminum foil, and we're going to let this sit for about 10 minutes here, 10 to 15. All right, now we're going to take off the aluminum foil. You can see now the pepper is easier to handle, but you can, it's gotten a little bit charcoaled on the back, but we can actually easily put it on here for a little bit easier to touch. You can actually peel off the skin of the pepper. And you can eat it with the skin on, or you can eat it without, but it's a nice way to just kind of cook it a little bit differently. It gets nice and sweet, so then you have a nice peeled pepper that is tasty to eat. And you can just serve this on the side, or sometimes you can serve this alongside with like a chicken, or serve it over rice, but it's a nice kind of fun way to have red peppers.